Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today, you'll improve your English while learning about one of the greatest icons in sports history. Have you ever imagined being so good at something that people call you the king? Very few people in the world have ever earned that title, but when it comes to soccer, only one name stands above the rest: Pelé. He wasn't just a player, he was a revolution. A poor boy from Brazil who, with his sheer genius, conquered the world and became the face of the most popular sport on the planet. Did you know that Pelé is the only player in history to win 3 World Cups? And that he scored more than 1,000 goals in his career? But Pelé's story goes far beyond numbers. He broke barriers, changed soccer forever, and became an immortal legend. Stay with us until the end because you'll discover amazing facts about Pelé that very few people know. And of course, if you love this kind of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and comment. What is your favorite Pelé moment? Now, let's begin this incredible journey through the life of the king of soccer. Pelé was not born a king. He was born Edson Arantes do Nascimento on October 23, 1940, in the small town of Três Corações, Brazil. His name was inspired by Thomas Edison, the famous inventor, though ironically, young Edson grew up in a home without electricity. His family was poor, and his father, João Ramos do Nascimento, known as Dondinho, was a talented footballer whose career was cut short by injuries. From an early age, Pelé was introduced to the beautiful game. His father taught him the basics, and despite their financial struggles, the young boy's passion for soccer was unstoppable. Without money for a proper ball, he and his friends would play in the streets using a sock stuffed with paper or a grapefruit. But where did the name Pelé come from? That's one of the great mysteries of his life. According to Pelé himself, it was a childhood nickname that made no sense to him. He earned it when he mispronounced the name of a goalkeeper called Bile. His school friends found it funny, and the name stuck. At first, Pelé hated it, even getting into fights over it. But little did he know that this name would soon become legendary. Despite his humble beginnings, Pelé always had big dreams. He once told his father that he would win a World Cup for Brazil, a bold statement from a boy who couldn't even afford soccer shoes. But determination ran in his blood. To help his struggling family, young Pelé worked shining shoes at train stations. But even while working, his mind was always on soccer. His talent was undeniable, and his father's coaching helped him develop incredible skills from an early age. Pelé's first real chance came when he joined a local youth team called Bauru Athletic Club, coached by Waldemar de Brito, a former Brazilian international player. De Brito immediately saw something special in the young boy and predicted that Pelé would become the best footballer in the world. By the time Pelé was just 15, his talent was already too big for his small town. In 1956, De Brito took him to Santos FC, a professional club that would change his life forever. At first, the club's directors weren't convinced that a skinny 15-year-old boy could make a difference. But after seeing him play, they knew they had a future star on their hands. In his very first professional match, Pelé scored a goal, setting the tone for what would become one of the most legendary careers in sports history. Just 1 year later, at 16 years old, he became the top scorer of the Brazilian league, and soon, the entire world would take notice of the boy who played like no one had ever seen before. By the time Pelé was 17 years old, he was no longer just a promising young player, he was already a rising star. His performances for Santos FC had turned heads across Brazil, and it didn't take long for the national team to take notice. In 1957, at just 16 years old, Pelé made his debut for the Brazilian national team, becoming the youngest player ever to wear the iconic yellow jersey. He even scored in his very first match against Argentina. But the real test was yet to come: the 1958 FIFA World Cup in Sweden. Despite his immense talent, Pelé almost didn't make it to the tournament. The Brazilian coaching staff was skeptical about bringing such a young and inexperienced player to the biggest stage in world football. To make matters worse, Pelé suffered a knee injury before the tournament began, which kept him out of the first 2 matches. But when he finally got his chance, he made history. Pelé played his first World Cup match against the Soviet Union in the group stage, and while he didn't score, his skill and confidence were undeniable. But it was in the quarterfinals against Wales that Pelé truly announced himself to the world. With the game tied at 0-0, Brazil was struggling to break down the Welsh defense. Then, in a moment of pure magic, Pelé controlled the ball inside the box, flicked it past a defender, and coolly finished into the net. It was the only goal of the game, and it made him the youngest player to ever score in a World Cup. That was just the beginning. In the semifinals against France, Pelé put on one of the most astonishing performances in World Cup history. At just 17, he scored a hat-trick, 3 goals in one match, to lead Brazil to a 5-2 victory over a French team that featured the tournament's top scorer, Just Fontaine. Brazil was now in the final, and the world was about to witness something truly special. On June 29, 1958, Brazil faced Sweden in the final. The hosts took an early lead, but Brazil quickly responded. Pelé, just 17 years old, delivered one of the greatest performances in World Cup history. He scored 2 unforgettable goals. For the first, he received the ball in the penalty area, chipped it over a defender's head, and volleyed it into the net. One of the most iconic goals in World Cup history. Later, he added another goal with a precise header. When the final whistle blew, Brazil had won 5-2, securing their first-ever World Cup title. Pelé collapsed on the field in tears, overwhelmed by emotion. He had just become the youngest player ever to win a World Cup, and the world had witnessed the birth of a legend. Pelé finished the tournament with 6 goals in just 4 matches, instantly becoming a global superstar. His combination of skill, creativity, and composure under pressure was unlike anything the football world had ever seen. At just 17 years old, he had fulfilled the promise he made to his father years earlier. He had won the World Cup for Brazil. But this was only the beginning. Over the next decade, Pelé would dominate world football like no one before him. After his incredible performance in the 1958 World Cup, Pelé returned to Brazil as a national hero. But for him, this was only the beginning. Over the next decade, he would dominate world football, break records, and redefine the game in a way that no one had ever seen before. While Pelé had conquered the world at just 17, his club career was just as impressive. He continued to shine with Santos FC, where he became the most feared striker in Brazilian football. His goal-scoring ability was unreal. He could score with both feet, his head, from long distances or in tight spaces. In 1962 and 1963, Pelé led Santos to back-to-back Copa Libertadores titles, the most prestigious club competition in South America. He also helped the club win the Intercontinental Cup, defeating the legendary Benfica team in 1962 with a stunning hat-trick in the final. By the mid-1960s, Santos was so popular that they traveled the world playing exhibition matches. Wherever Pelé went, stadiums were packed, and people treated him like royalty. But as his club career soared, Pelé faced challenges on the international stage. Heading into the 1962 World Cup in Chile, Pelé was expected to dominate once again. In Brazil's opening match, he scored a brilliant solo goal, but disaster struck in the next game. He suffered a serious injury that ruled him out for the rest of the tournament. Fortunately, Brazil still had an incredible team, and Garrincha stepped up to lead them to their second consecutive World Cup victory. 4 years later, in the 1966 World Cup in England, things took a darker turn. By this time, Pelé was considered the best player in the world, and opposing teams targeted him with brutal fouls. The referees offered little protection, and after suffering a series of violent tackles, Pelé was injured again. Brazil was eliminated early, and Pelé was so frustrated that he announced he would never play in another World Cup. But fate had other plans. Despite his disappointment in 1966, Pelé eventually changed his mind and returned for the 1970 World Cup in Mexico. And it's a good thing he did, because what happened next was nothing short of legendary. Brazil entered the tournament with one of the greatest teams ever assembled, featuring stars like Rivellino, Jairzinho, Tostão, and Carlos Alberto. But Pelé was still the leader, the king of this golden generation. He dominated from the start, scoring 4 goals and providing some of the most unforgettable moments in World Cup history. The impossible save in the group stage against England, Pelé hit a perfect header, but goalkeeper Gordon Banks made what is still considered the greatest save of all time. The genius dummy play against Uruguay in the semifinal, Pelé let the ball roll past the goalkeeper without touching it, leaving defenders confused, though he narrowly missed the goal. The perfect assist in the final, in the World Cup final against Italy, Pelé scored the opening goal with a header, then later assisted Carlos Alberto's iconic goal, considered one of the best team goals in history. Brazil won 4-1, claiming their third World Cup title, and Pelé became the only player in history to win 3 World Cups. After the 1970 World Cup, Pelé had nothing left to prove. He had cemented his place as the greatest player of all time, and his performance in Mexico is still regarded as one of the finest in football history. With 3 World Cups, over 1,000 career goals and countless records, Pelé had become more than just a player. He was now a global icon. By the early 1970s, Pelé had already conquered every major football milestone. He had won 3 World Cups, scored over 1,000 goals, and cemented his place as the greatest footballer of all time. Yet, despite all his success, Pelé wasn't ready to walk away from the game. Instead, he embarked on a new mission: to take soccer beyond Brazil and turn it into a truly global sport. In 1974, after spending nearly 2 decades with Santos FC, Pelé announced his retirement from Brazilian football. But his journey wasn't over. In 1975, he made a shocking decision. He signed with the New York Cosmos, a team in the North American Soccer League, NASL. At the time, soccer was still a minor sport in the United States, with little professional structure and a small fan base. But Pelé's arrival changed everything. Pelé, the ambassador of soccer. Pelé's move to the U.S. wasn't just about playing. It was about spreading the love of soccer. The impact was immediate. Attendance at soccer games skyrocketed. The Cosmos started filling stadiums, and suddenly, the American public became interested in a sport they had once ignored. Celebrities like Muhammad Ali, Mick Jagger, and even U.S. presidents came to watch Pelé play. During his 3 years with the Cosmos, Pelé led the team to the 1977 NASL Championship, played in front of record-breaking crowds across the U.S., helped increase the popularity of soccer in North America, paving the way for future generations. In his farewell match in 1977, Pelé played 1/2 for Santos and 1/2 for the Cosmos, symbolizing his incredible career that had spanned continents. But Pelé's influence wasn't just limited to the pitch. Even after retiring from professional football, Pelé continued to be one of the most recognized and respected figures in the world. His status as an ambassador for soccer led him to work with organizations like the United Nations and UNICEF, using his fame to promote peace and fight poverty. He was also the first global footballer to transcend sports, appearing in movies, commercials, and music recordings. His famous phrase, "Football is the beautiful game," became a slogan that defined the sport worldwide. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, Pelé continued to travel the world, meeting world leaders, inspiring young players, and ensuring that soccer's popularity continued to grow. His impact was felt everywhere, from the streets of Brazil to the soccer stadiums of the United States and beyond. Even after retiring from the game, Pelé remained the face of football, a true ambassador of the sport that had given him everything. Even after he retired from football, Pelé's influence never faded. He was no longer scoring goals, but his impact on the sport and the world continued to grow. His name became synonymous with excellence, and his legacy extended far beyond the field. Pelé's records and achievements remained untouched for decades. He was the only player to have won 3 World Cups, a feat that still stands today. His goal-scoring ability set a standard that few players have ever come close to. Even in an era when modern football has evolved with new tactics and technology, Pelé's name is still mentioned in every debate about the greatest players of all time. But his true greatness was not just in numbers, it was in what he represented. He was a global ambassador for the sport, using his fame to promote football in countries where the game was still growing. He traveled the world, meeting leaders, inspiring young players, and proving that football was more than just a sport. It was a universal language that connected people from every background. Pelé also made a significant impact off the pitch. He dedicated himself to humanitarian work, supporting causes like children's education, fighting poverty, and promoting peace. He worked with organizations like UNICEF and the United Nations, always using his voice for positive change. For millions of people, he was not just a football legend. He was a symbol of hope, resilience, and greatness. Even in his later years, Pelé remained an icon. Whenever a young player emerged as a new football sensation, he was always compared to Pelé, showing how deeply his influence remained in the game. His presence at World Cup events, award ceremonies, and international football matches always drew admiration and respect. He was celebrated by football legends, world leaders, and fans alike, proving that his legacy was truly immortal. Pelé was more than just the greatest footballer of all time. He was a pioneer, a hero, and a global inspiration. His story, from a poor boy kicking a ball made of socks to becoming the king of football, will forever be remembered as one of the most incredible journeys in sports history. His name will continue to echo through generations, inspiring young players to dream big and believe that anything is possible. Even though Pelé is no longer with us, his legend will never fade. The king of football is, and always will be, eternal.